All right. Well, welcome back, Gabe, to another episode of Safeonomics.
Yeah, this is a really fun one. I feel like I say that with every episode because it is true. Everyone is is fantastic. But this is one of those where, Scott, I have to tell you, I had to remind myself that I was actually hosting this with you because I found myself just listening to our guest the entire time and just being floored. Like I just felt like I was learning so much from from Dr. Megan.
Yeah, and so today we talked to Dr. Megan Trantner, and she's if you haven't seen her on LinkedIn, she's worked for PepsiCo, Amazon, Netflix, at the global EH&S level, even having positions created, so she could increase her sphere of influence within and leadership within those organizations. We have a super interesting conversation about her progress through her career and her journey across the globe, but also the fact that she's now launching a Design Your Brilliant Future program, and you can participate and have access to her on a regular basis, which is just mind-blowing to think that people are going to be able to meet with her on a weekly basis, review the material that she's prepared and ask her questions and collaborate with others that are also in the program. So um, I
Yeah,
just gave the whole episode away, but you got to tune in and you got to listen to Megan.
Yeah, and I feel like this is such a great conversation around that career development piece that we've talked about a lot on Safeonomics. And Megan brings out some great frameworks, some ideas, and really a pathway of how safety professionals can continue to grow in this career, maybe in your own organization, but definitely for yourself and how you're continuing to develop in this wonderful field.
Yeah. So thanks for joining us on this episode, and sit back and prepare to have your mind blown. Well, welcome to another episode of Safeonomics. I'm Scott Cuthbert, one of the co-founders of Safeopedia.
And I'm Gabe Encarnacion, president of BBL Safety.
Yeah, and super excited to have Dr. Megan Trentner join us today. We're gonna have a super interesting conversation. We're gonna talk a little bit about her journey, her experience, and advice she has for others, and then also something special that we're doing with Megan within the Safeopedia community. So I will, with that, I'll turn it over to Megan to do a quick introduction and give us a little bit of a background.
Well, thank you. Hi, everyone. Hi, Scott. Hi, Gabe.
Hello,
Nice
hello.
to be here. Hello. Yeah, so I'm Dr. Megan Tranter, and I'm very happy to be here. I have a really interesting career, I think, and actually, I think every safety professional has an interesting story about perhaps how they got into safety and how their career has progressed. But I found mine quite interesting. Sometimes I feel like this little girl who's come from country Australia, moved halfway across the world, now in the US, and I've lived here for 20 years.
Hmm.
And I've just been able to build this most amazing career in health and safety in a way that I never expected. So I actually started my career out of university. I studied health and safety at university. And the first couple of jobs I had were really specialized. So the first one was the equivalent of an OSHA inspector. And actually, I was supporting the rural industry. So imagine going out to farms in northern Queensland, which is the northern state of Australia. And I also specialized in industrial hygiene. And from there, I worked in the mining industry. I worked in academia for a few years as a university professor in Australia and Hong Kong.
Hmm.
And then I decided that maybe I should get a real job in health and safety. And I was able to get a job actually at some pretty well-known names. So when I was in Australia, I was the National Health and Safety Manager at McDonald's, looking after a number of countries, and also Coca-Cola Amatil, which is a bottler of, or was a bottler of the Coca-Cola company. And then, as I said, 20 years ago, my husband and I made a decision to move to the US. And, it was a real big dream of ours. We'd always wanted to move overseas. And, I often tell this story that I was 36 weeks pregnant with our first child when I hopped on that airplane and moved to the US.
Gosh.
Yeah, gave birth 2 weeks later. So my eldest is now in his third year of college, and had to basically restart my career because, when you have such a big change like that and people don't know you, it felt like to me anyway, starting from scratch. And I was given a lot of good opportunities during my time here in the US. And of course, I still live here. I live up in Seattle, where I've had opportunities and folks who've opened doors for me to help really give me those chances and then build the career from there. So, some of my big claim to fame, if you like, and it's actually something I'm really proud of, is being the first global vice president of EH&S at PepsiCo, and I was there for nearly a decade.
Hmm.
After that, I went to Amazon, their first global EH&S director, and then, changed industry, just worked in the pharmaceutical industry for a little while. And then most recently, and this has been a very cool job, I worked at Netflix, leading a team looking after production safety. So that means, the films and the TV shows that we
Yeah.
love watching on Netflix. We actually have safety teams who support them. And then I also looked after transportation as well. So, I like to think of it as just this incredible, actually quite incredible journey between different industries, getting a chance to be promoted, multiple times in companies and then across companies, and leading very high performing, brilliant teams and stunning colleagues from all of these companies that I've worked for.
That is a fantastic journey in safety, and it's one of those. The thing that popped into my mind is it's like, oh yeah, uh, go and become a safety professional, see the world, and do other things. And you that's definitely a fascinating journey to take, literally all over the world. And you've had the opportunity to work with some fairly large organizations. So some of the people that we've had an opportunity to talk with on Safeonomics, they'll be working at smaller organizations, or they're kind of a one person safety department essentially. What are some of the things that you've seen in a larger organization that were some of the benefits that you saw with being an EH&S professional in a company like McDonald's or with Amazon? What were the ways that you found were it was beneficial, and maybe some of the challenges that you ran into with an organization that big?
Yeah, they're amazing companies and amazing brands. PepsiCo, I think, at the time I was there, had about 300,000 employees, and
Wow.
I had a global role. And when I was with Amazon, I believe they were smaller than PepsiCo when I went to them. And when I left, they had 1 million employees, and now it's even bigger than that. So I think what's super interesting when you work for really large companies, there's a few things. The first one is that you realize over time that there is a really large impact that you can have
Hmm.
when you work for companies that can make a difference in the world. So I remember one of the companies that I worked for, we had a very large company-owned fleet. So, lots of vehicles around the world, everything from cars and vans to big trucks and, even a boat here and there. Um, and, one of the risks that we identified was road safety. And,
Hmm.
you often think about activities that you perform in the function of safety as serving the company and serving the workers. But when you look at some of those more socially or community facing risks, say like road safety, you realize that the work that you're doing in these companies makes a difference to the people and their families and friends, but also over the longer term, it makes a difference to the world.
Hmm.
With one of those examples, I was fortunate enough to represent my company as a member of a group that we launched at the United Nations. It's now an NGO called the Together for Safer Roads Initiative. And, when you're working through that at the beginning, it seems like a lot of hard work and you're wondering, where will this go? But
Right.
with the right people, you're really looking at, well, what is the impact that you can have both across different companies and different countries, and then across the world. So for me, one of the biggest things that I've loved about working in big companies is scaling. So, you think that you're doing the work and you might be doing the same type of work, influencing leaders and, trying to convince people to do certain things for safety and mitigating risk and controlling hazards. But when you work for the big companies, it's this massive multiplier effect. And then the other thing is, in managing teams and especially really big teams, and some of the companies I've worked for, my team has been in the thousands. So, really, really significantly sized teams, is you can really see how you can make an impact on people's career and see how people either come into safety from different previous professions or careers and how they grow themselves in different ways. And I just think it's a beautiful profession. It's a very noble profession. Most of us come into the profession or stay in the profession because I think of the way it makes us feel that we're helping people and caring for people, even people that we'll never meet. But we do it because we're having this positive impact on people and the world. And so, yeah, one of the things I've adored in working for these big companies has been the impact and the, yeah, impact on people's careers and really helping them along. You asked a second question, which was what is challenging?
Right.
And maybe this is the big difference between big companies and smaller companies. And I remember someone saying this to me once. They said, this company, Megan, it's like a big ship. And so, imagine trying to turn a big ship. It happens very slowly.
Right.
And so one of the things I learnt from working at these companies is the need to have patience. Definitely set out a strategy, be ambitious and have a true vision, a true north of where you want to get to, but understand that sometimes you need to take the small wins. And then, any of us with kids, we've probably heard that saying that the days are long and the years are short. And I feel that way because I just dropped my second child off at university the other day. And so, when you're in the day-to-day, it feels sometimes like it's so slow. But when you look back over the time, you see the progress and the massive impact that you make by doing it that way.
I love that answer because what you've done is that, first of all, referring to the safety profession as both beautiful and noble is pretty incredible. And that you've been able to see, despite some of the challenges and the difficulty of turning around a large ship, there is still progress that can be made in that. And it's not just a challenging thing, but you see the benefits and the joy that comes out of making an impact, even in a large organization. I think that's such a great perspective because I'm sure there are times where it just feels like, yes, it's not moving fast enough. But as you take those small wins, as you said, you still get that sense that you are making a difference and seeing the results of it in sometimes at a global scale. And then still being able to get in touch with people on the individual basis. I'm sure that is extremely satisfying and it's what keeps your career going.
Yeah. And the other part of it is you can't do it alone and you have to bring people along with you. And when you have these global roles, you realize that it's obvious that there are different regulatory regimes. I think that's probably a given. But I think the other big learning for me was just understanding the impact of different cultures on both their risk tolerance, on their own speed, on the way that they think about change, and then also understanding different leadership types. And so, one of my biggest learnings over time was that just because I thought something was the right way of doing something didn't mean that was correct. That's not a fact. Just because Megan thought something should be done a certain way. And then, there's different ways of doing that when you are influencing people and trying to convince them to make change that could be expensive or perhaps not aligned with their business goals and what they were anticipating to do. So, it takes a lot of zigging and zagging and sometimes 2 steps forward and 1 step back. It's where I became a little more comfortable with failure, not totally comfortable with failure, but accepting that what you think is the right way to do something isn't always the case. And there are plenty of other ideas out there and plenty of other ways of doing things. And to be flexible and curious enough as a leader so that you take the feedback and that you take other people's input, because in my experience, their ideas are very often better than mine. So, it's just a wise thing to take that feedback and actively seek it as well.
Yeah, and I I want to go back a little bit to when it was when you were kind of growing up within the safety industry, like you said, small town Queensland, I think you said,
Yeah.
and just sort of getting started. What do you think was the the elements or the activities or achievements that sort of helped you move up to that mid management kind of position within your organization?
Yeah, it's a great question, Scott. So, on my personal journey, I worked really hard to get very technically proficient in the area of health and safety. And, I do recognize that people come in from different areas and sometimes it's extremely valuable, say, to have a better understanding of the business than necessarily understand all of the technical areas of safety. But for myself, that was the way that I approached it, was becoming very technically strong in the area of health and safety and a little bit in environmental compliance and sustainability as well, but mostly in health and safety. Because what it did for me is it gave me the confidence that when I was talking to people about the needs to control the risk, that I knew where I was coming from. And so when we were having these discussions about various topics, that I could present either the business case or the risks and have them understand why I was recommending something from a pretty solid basis. Also, I reflect back to those times when I was very early in my career and I looked really young. I'm a small woman, and I'll just, say this in case anyone else that's listening ever feels this way as well. And you get into these environments where people might look at you and they judge you on the way you look, for instance. And so what I did was say to myself, well, if I know what I'm talking about and if I can articulate it well, then that is the way for me to get in. I think what's interesting in my career is by becoming so technically proficient at the beginning, I didn't necessarily understand the softer side to health and safety and the people side. I saw it as very scientifically based. And again, I share this vulnerability perhaps now with a little bit of hindsight,
Mm.
after working in health and safety for many decades and really understanding how the profession has changed over the years and how I think it needs to continue to change. That it needs to think about people and caring for people, and especially in this time that we're in at the moment, showing care for people and looking after workers and employees. It's an amazing value proposition for people to work in companies that care for them. And I remember actually the big change for me happened in the way I was approaching my career. It was after myself having kids
Mm.
and, realizing how it must feel for people if they get injured or their workmates get injured or their friends get injured, and this impact that it has on people's lives. Whereas before I was, just more, well, this is how you, measure noise or dust,
Right.
or this is how you do a machinery risk assessment. And so there really was a pivotal changing moment for me where it became much more personal. And also, I realized that the way to bring leaders and people along is to make it more personal for them, and have them understand that this profession, this function is about people and not necessarily just about the technical elements or the regulations or whatever.
So
Yeah.
So,
something that you touched on in there, which I feel like there's a connection to a comment you made earlier, where you said that as your career developed, there were people that opened doors for you and were part of that journey for you. And then you're mentioning now about how initially you had a very scientific kind of fact-driven, data-driven approach to safety, and then eventually you started to see more of those facets, the personal side of things, the soft skills that people were that needed to be developed in order to connect with others, the human side of safety that was in there as well. Were there people that opened those doors that were also telling you or teaching you about that piece to help you progress in your career? Because that, it seems like those are the kinds of things that you really learn on the job, and that you learn from others, that it doesn't necessarily turn up in a textbook. So how did that work? How did you connect with others that opened those doors, and then it also helped you develop those parts of your career?
It's such a good point. I don't remember any textbooks teaching me about this. You know, and I've written books as well, and I certainly didn't cover on it either. Um, I I think there's a couple of points here. You know, probably the first one is one thing that I realized during my career, and my career is not over yet, so I shouldn't say it in the past tense, is that it's great to have mentors, but actually I think the biggest thing that helped me in my career was a sponsor. And, you know, people may or may not have heard of sponsors, and I hadn't heard of it for a long time. But it's basically that someone who is advocating for you, perhaps when you're not even in the room, that they are putting your name forward for a new project or a new opportunity, that they are there speaking up, you know, about, it could be about the topic of safety, and it could be about you. You know, I found mentors to be amazing in terms of helping me think through what I needed to focus on. But having a mentor does not necessarily get you in the room when you need to be in the room. And so sponsors, I found, are those ones who really help with that. I've been fortunate as well in the companies I've worked for to work alongside some very skilled, stunning colleagues, you know, who had perhaps been in the industry a long time and took me under their wing. I don't know why, but, you know, maybe they saw something in me and they took me under their wing. And I think it's because I'm so curious that, and ask a lot of questions and genuinely want to learn and know things and show a level of humility, that when you behave like that, people are willing to help you even more.
Hmm.
So, you know, that was one of the biggest things that I tried to do during my career, is keep asking questions and keep learning, and always seeking to understand. Because I mentioned earlier, you know, in safety, I don't think safety professionals do know all of the answers. You know, it's the people who are exposed to the hazards every day. It's people who are needing to behave a certain way because they have to meet productivity requirements or whatever it is, that they behave a certain way. And that's not something that you can easily just solve for with a safe working procedure. So, you know, understanding the complexity of human beings, and, you know, just this way that you can help them.
Yeah, I want to I think that was a great segue into the project or program that we're launching with the Safeopedia community. But I wanted to, before we dive into that, I wanted to talk a little bit. So, you know, we hear a lot of times that safety professionals are struggling with career advancement within their organizations. And so, you know, you gave some pointers on how to get out of the field level maybe and into mid management. And you have some really interesting, unique experience with brand new positions that were created that didn't exist before. So, and obviously with the doctor at the front of Megan, you know, you've invested in education as well. So, what were the again the things that kind of helped you propel to that senior level of within organizations, and even potentially have new positions created within those organizations?
Yeah. You know, Scott, you know, speaking of the doctor thing, I hid that for the longest time. So I actually started my PhD when I was an academic. And then it took me nearly 10 years, because every time I had a child, I took a year off, and I was doing it part-time. So it took me nearly a decade to get it finished. But I also hid it because I thought that it would make me look too academic. So it's interesting, isn't it? That maybe what some people see as a strength in having something like that, I, for a long time, thought it as a negative and wouldn't put it in my resume. Like, I wouldn't tell people about it at all. But, getting those jobs or really building those jobs that didn't exist before. What I used to do is, I mentioned I was really curious, but also I was very ambitious. And so I wasn't necessarily looking for a new title and looking for this big promotion, although some people may disagree with that. But what I was looking for is to see how I could support the companies I worked for having best-in-class safety performance. And, that was driven by different things. I remember one company I worked for, we were on the Dow Jones Sustainability Index. And within that criteria, there was a section on health and safety. I think there were 3 questions. And we needed to do better with our scoring for those. And so, part of that was doing certain things to improve the performance. And one thing that I learned, and I'm probably pretty good at, is looking around corners and connecting the dots. So this, I think, is also a skill that people can develop over time to get into those more senior roles, which is to become a strategist and also a valued member of a leadership team. So what that means is actually understanding a business, not only being in the room and talking about health and safety topics and coming in with problems, but actually having a broad enough perspective about the business that one can give insight and input on the same level as the other people who are in that leadership team as well. But what I did, I think of probably the biggest job of my career, which was one where I was at the company for about a decade and was promoted a number of times. I started asking questions and I started asking why we weren't doing certain things. And maybe it was naivety at the beginning, but also it was, thinking about this future vision. And then I started putting myself forward and, I understood what my remit was because I had a certain remit and it wasn't global at the time that I joined that company. But then I started doing certain things that were having influence over other parts of the business. And then I was fortunate to get connected with someone and we worked together on a global project, which was looking then at the structure and the future vision of what health and safety and environment should be at that company. And so perhaps one of the pieces of advice or actions, that I'd recommend is actually putting your hand up, or sometimes maybe don't even put your hand up, just do it, and start doing things that make a difference. Because lots of companies want that from people. They want innovative leaders. They want someone who's courageous. They want someone who's going to take action without being told to take action. And especially if you see something that could be improved, take a little bit of a risk yourself and start exploring it either through a project or through a collaboration with someone else, and then deliver results. One of the things I talk about quite a bit, and I'm sure others do as well, is the important topic of trust. And, I think as a health and safety professional, our credibility is based on trust. And trust can be received or given, in different ways. But one of the ways I think about trust is delivering on what you say you're going to do. So that becomes this other piece as well. If you identify something that you see could get better and can add value to the business overall, just start working on it, and think about the value that you're giving and then deliver on that. And then once people see that you have delivered on something, and especially if it's outside of a super technical area like safety, people start seeing you as a bigger leader and they give you different opportunities because you're not only the person who can interpret a regulation or support in developing a risk assessment or, sitting into a safety committee meeting. You're so much more than that. And I think that's where these really senior jobs are. It's showing well-rounded leadership, strategic thinking, being able to bring people together, leading high-performing teams, and, bringing all of that together as a leader and not only being in one function or one area.
all your comments, Megan. I'm in here internally cheering, hearing what you're saying. I think Scott and I have had conversations about how curiosity is superpower, and how that sense of curiosity is so critical for you to actually, as you said, be able to see around corners and anticipate. And then in order to unlock that curiosity, as you said, having ambition to actually do these things and take action on them. I think that's, to me, that's wonderful to be able to feed that curiosity, and it just makes you even more curious as you start to learn more about the business, to learn the things that you're able to do, and then as you said, to use that ambition to find areas where you can actually make a difference and grow the organization, understanding how the business works, so that you can actually become an asset to the organization, instead of, as you said, being the one that comes in there, and when the safety professional comes in, people kind of roll their eyes and think, okay, well, now they're going to tell us what the new problems are. No, you're actually there to bring solutions, and in a context of the business overall. I think that's fascinating.
Yeah. And my takeaway, and correct me if I'm off base, is like, don't just wait for the promotion. Start behaving as though you have that promotion already, and start functioning as that senior level person within the organization. And ideally, the organization will realize that you're operating at that next level, and reward you with the position that corresponds with your investment and your leadership within the organization.
Right, because what's the worst thing that can happen to you? Someone can tell you to stop it. Oh, okay. If that's what someone wants to do, they can. In
Yeah.
my experience, businesses are looking for this. They're looking for people to be self-starters, to have the initiative, to give something extra. And sure, there are businesses out there where they would like people to just follow a playbook and play it small. Of course, there's all different types of businesses and organizations out there. But in my experience, the really high-performing businesses, they're looking for high-performing talent. And that's where safety professionals can actually expand. And you see that with so many, and I'm sure many in your audience here as well have experienced this themselves, where they've been asked, well, maybe can you lead this team now or that team now? I've had the same experience where I was looking after a certain remit and area, and then I was asked to take on a different area that I didn't know very much about, a little bit, but not a lot. And it's really interesting. Number one, to me, it increases job satisfaction. Again, as a very curious person, I love learning about new things. But I think it also shows the value a very strong safety professional is able to work cross-functionally with many different groups and many different people. And actually, a lot of them have that ability to be fungible and sort of to work across different areas, and it's extremely valuable to a business.
Yeah. And I was going to say, sorry, just you said worst case scenario, they could say no. And worst case scenario is some other organization is going to recognize that experience. If you voluntarily take on a cross-functional role, within your organization to tackle a project, and your existing company doesn't appreciate it, there, like you said, there might be those high performance organizations out there that will recognize that and will appreciate it. So it's you're investing in yourself and in your skill set and in your future regardless.
Yeah, my thoughts on that too is that you mentioned several of the positions that were created, basically, that didn't exist before you started working in that organization. And I think that's just a testament to the organization recognizing that, wait a second, there is actually a need in this area, that to the point where we have to create a whole new position to be able to oversee the health and safety aspects of the organization itself. So I would say for a lot of our listeners, just because you come to a company and they don't have an opening for a specific position that's related to health and safety, don't let that dissuade you from being that change agent that's going to come into that organization and say, well, maybe you didn't have this in the past, but look at the additional value I can bring by being part of this, and maybe you should have that position going forward. That would probably be helpful.
The other thing I would add is don't let job titles rule your job satisfaction. I got
Exactly.
into that sort of area a little while ago thinking, oh, I needed the next promotion and I want the next big title. But actually, when you work across different industries, you also realize that there are different levels of jobs. So you might see a VP jobs somewhere in one industry, and in another industry, that might be called a manager job. And you think to yourself, man, this sounds like a great industry or a great role, but look at the job title. And one thing I learned over the years was just to not worry about that so much. If it's really good work and it's something that's aligned with my goals and values, then that's the sort of work that I want to do. And, I'd encourage others to do the same. When you think about job satisfaction and what really lights you up in your career, think through yourself, who are you as a person? What's your personality? What is important to you with your own personal values? And try and find that match with a company or an organization that's congruent, because it makes the work so much more enjoyable than, if there is that mismatch.
I agree with that.
And so we have a lot of interesting discussions on Safeonomics, and usually when we start to get to the end of the discussion, we're saying, hey, we should maybe have this person back, or wouldn't it be great to have them involved in future?
I think that's every one of our episodes we've talked about.
I think so. Yeah, I think so. But the reality with you, Megan, is we've already arranged this, right? So maybe you could talk a little bit about what the next phase in your career is, the brilliant futures, and then we can let people know what we're going to be doing within the Safeopedia community as well.
Yeah, I'd love to, Scott.
Yeah.
I think all of us, when we're at different stages of our career, sometimes we feel really emboldened and motivated with what we're doing. And sometimes we have days where we're like, oh my goodness, what am I doing here? And so, I have built a community and a course, so let's call it a program, which is aimed to support ambitious safety professionals who are either contemplating or at a time of career transformation. And, that could mean that you're just thinking about it, you're wondering what's next for me. Or it could be at a time where you're like, yeah, I think I need to make a change, but I don't know what that is. And so this community, and it's called Design Your Brilliant Future, is one intended to support safety professionals throughout the world, actually, as they think through what they value, what they would like to achieve in their career, and to be supported through a framework and process of thinking that through, as well as a community of like-minded, ambitious safety professionals that can support one another. And Scott and I have been talking about this for a little while, and we both feel that for many of the safety professionals out there, and hopefully this resonates with some of you if you're listening to this, you do reach different stages in your career and in your journey of life where you're asking those questions. Should I be doing this anymore? Does this light me up anymore? Or, wow, I'm doing so great, but what's next for me? Or shall I change industries? Shall I generalize? Shall I specialize? Like, so many questions. And as safety professionals, there are plenty of technical training out there. We see them, we know them, we go to them, each of us. But we often wonder, and it feels very lonely when you're sitting there by yourself asking those questions. And if you have a community around you that can help you and support you, and you can do the same with others, it just makes this journey so much easier. Because I have found that, in the decades that I've worked in health and safety, it is a beautiful career, but it's not always easy. And it's not always easy for a number of different reasons. But when you have that community around you that can support you and guide you, then it just makes it that little bit easier. And hopefully for all of you, you have long careers in health and safety. And, just being able to think through different ways of approaching your career is what we're offering here.
Yeah, I'm super excited to be partnering with you on this. We've offered it already to some of our founding members who helped us launch our community, and really looking forward to getting more of the Safeopedia community involved, and also helping you grow your community as well. Because I think that, I mean, we sort of touched on it. It's been a thread, through all of our episodes, is that there isn't that traditional clear path from
Hmm.
safety manager to the C-suite, but that doesn't mean that you can't ascend through the organization. And I think you're that guiding light, that everybody can learn from your experience and your example, and like you say, sometimes your cup gets a little empty and you need to fill it back up again. And I think that's again why we've aligned so closely on this, is that we really would like to help people fill that cup up so they can get back at it the next day, or realize when they do need a change professionally or within their organization. So looking forward to getting that started. And what's the cadence, or what's the kind of details for the Design Your Brilliant Future?
Yeah, so what we have is we have a self-paced course based on a framework that I've used personally to help me think through my career. But I think the bigger benefit over the course is great, by the way. It has
Of
videos and
course.
audios, of course. Uh, and frameworks and worksheets and materials, just to methodically go through these different stages that you can think about when you're designing your brilliant future. But the more impactful side of it is the community. And so we meet totally optional, but we have 2 times each week where we're facilitating sessions over Zoom, or I think it's Google Meet, and then also having this really cool community on both mobile as well as laptop or computer to be able to chat to one another and collaborate there. So we meet on Thursdays. I've got 2 different time zones, one to suit East Coast, North America, and Europe, and then the second one in the evening time for West Coast, and then as we get over to um, APAC. So, it's the intent here is really planning on having this be one of the most engaging and brilliant places for people to go that they can think about their career. I've been lucky during my career several times to have a coach,
Mhm.
and with a coach, and the coach was provided by my employer. A lot of the time they were psychologists, and they were fabulous and they got me to think a certain way, but they didn't actually understand what the work was, nor did they understand the career progression, nor had they seen, through leading safety teams, what the different paths could be for people. So, what I'm hoping to offer here is by having that experience and leading these different teams and seeing people having these most amazing careers in ways that you'd never expect, and the either the promotion or even quite frankly trying something different for a while, that's good as well. Maybe that's what you need at some point in time, is to step back a little bit and try something else and then come back in. But
Mhm.
by myself having led these different teams and experiencing what it's like to watch people's career as well as supporting and coaching them, my ambition myself is to help people in the safety profession to chart their own path and support them with that.
I think that's a really valuable experience for people, because sometimes when you're going down a certain path, it's really easy to get kind of blind to any of the other options that might be there. And Scott and I, and it sounds like you've been on the same journey as well, where if you're naturally curious and you have that ambition to chart out that path, it can be very exciting. But it's very scary at the same time. And especially if you're just in your own head trying to figure out how to do this, it could be pretty nerve-wracking. So even having a framework or someone having those guiding questions, and of course a network of people to go on that journey with, can be extremely helpful. And hopefully that's what people will experience through this, is that their horizons will be broadened just a little bit more, and give them that clarity that's needed to see what to do next.
Yeah, and also understanding that it's okay to change your mind.
Mm,
Often people think you need to have this clear path going from A to B to C, and life doesn't work like that. Even myself throughout my career, I actually took 1 year where I led a tech team and a product team building software, not related to safety at all,
mm,
like totally not related to safety at all. And I got to tell you, it was one of the best experiences of my career because when you're embedded in the function of safety for so long, you think a certain way, you operate a certain way. But when you have a different experience, all of a sudden you're like, oh, this is what it's like to lead something different. And here's how different business partners are interacting with me. And as a leader, I'm focused on this goal. I'm not necessarily focused on those business partners' goals for other things. And
mm,
so it gave me definitely a different perspective on career, but also understanding that those different skills and experiences that you get, even outside of safety, they're so incredibly valuable because you're learning ways within a business that they're operating that you just hadn't seen before, and also different ways of doing things and thinking about things. So I think this is the other part with Design Your Brilliant Future is the support and the framework is actually there to encourage people to think big and to realize that, just because you make a decision one day, 1 week, 1 year, it doesn't mean that you're stuck with that decision forever. You can change your mind. And honestly, it's up to you. It doesn't matter what other people think. It's totally up to you to build this career that you'd like, to have the agency over your career and over your life, and to not feel like that someone needs to tell you what to do or that someone's going to come and save you. You can build it yourself. That's really the underlying premise with all of this is if you're ambitious and if you want to achieve something, you can achieve nearly anything.
mm,
Now, I will never be a NBA basketball player, but and it's not my goal, but also I'm just not going to do it. But certainly, I would have never thought that I would have had the #1 global health and safety job at
mm,
these amazing companies and brands that I've worked for. I would have never have even thought that was possible, and yet
mm,
it is possible. And that's also, I think, the encouragement that I give people is to say, nearly anything is possible in life.
mm.
You just need to work out how to figure it out.
And I'm I'm enrolled in the program, and I'm hoping Jamie doesn't, see this episode, because I mean, once I complete this Brilliant Futures program, who knows what's in store for me. So
Well, I think what's really neat about this too is that Scott and you and I have talked about this, and we've mentioned it to our listeners multiple times that really the goal of Safeonomics is to look at that intersection of safety and business, and specifically in this particular season, looking at how professionals can continue to grow in this area with safety. And even just saying that there's a safety profession, there's so many facets to it and so many different areas where you can grow. This sounds like a great avenue to even explore those different facets and see how do you develop your career specific to you in this field. I mean, it is beautiful and noble. We've mentioned that a couple of times. But how do you unlock that joy that comes into it? How do you unlock that future and that career? This is a great way to actually start exploring that.
yeah, I think this is a must do for anyone in the safety profession, especially if your cup is only half full these days, or you're wondering what's next, or how to, if you are ambitious and you're not being recognized by your organization, definitely sign up for Megan's program. We'll have the link below. Megan's also graciously offered to speak at Safety Connect this year, so we'll see her again soon at Safety Connect 2024. You described the program that you're running within your community, but we're definitely going to have you back for regular workshops within the Safeopedia community as well, promoting the Design Your Brilliant Futures, and I know you've got a few other things in store that you're working on in the background as well. So we'll be with you along the way, and we'll be announcing all those new programs as they come out. But definitely, you know, you owe it to yourself to sign up for Design Your Brilliant Future, and definitely you owe it to yourself to get in that community and connect with like-minded people and really question, not in a bad way, but in a positive way, question, you know what you're doing on a day-to-day basis, and where you're headed with your personal life and your career.
Yeah, and if people want to connect with me as well, and I'm sure we were going to say this anyway, I am very active on LinkedIn. You know, one of the things that I'm working hard on is adding value back to the community. And part of that is through insightful posts and information for people that might be helpful to them, to safety professionals. So it's easy to find me on LinkedIn. I think I'm the only Dr. Megan Tranter. And as I often say to people, you know, remember there's a person on the end of those DMs or the emails. So all you have to do is drop me a message and I'll reply. I always reply to people. So I'd love to hear from people as well. And that's been one of the joys of this, actually, Gabe and Scott, in launching this program, is hearing from people who are finding value from it or the prospect of it. People who are reading the posts on LinkedIn and saying, yeah, I really needed this today. And so that's my goal and ambition as well, is to give back, and so that people know that you're not alone and that all of us feel this way through our career and through life. And there are other people out there that perhaps, you know, you can talk to and you can give extra support with as well.
I love it. That's so awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. Really excited to be part of this and helping you launch, and really excited to be taking the program as well. So like I said, we'll have all the coordinates in the description below. We'll have Megan back at Safety Connect, and we'll definitely have you back within the safety community throughout the next several years, I hope, to help inspire and encourage people to invest in themselves and their future.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you for chatting with us.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much. And great talking to you. And like I say, we'll post the coordinates so you can connect. I'm a living testament to Megan does respond when you reach out on LinkedIn, and who knows what will come of it. So make sure you do.